Awesome. All right. Well, again, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from, but we are very excited to have you all with us. My name is Kylie Moody, and I work in the executive office and manage a lot of our online events. And we again are grateful for you all for joining us for Global Advising Week, which is based around May 2nd, which was when the official date when the Articles of Incorporation were signed, creating NACADA. So thank you all as advisors, success coaches, tutors, all of the work that you do to support students. We are grateful to you and all that you do. I'm going to turn it over to Bernadette Lewis from Sophia Learning. Sophia Learning is sponsoring Global Advising Week. And so Bernadette's going to talk to you a little bit about what they offer. So Bernadette.
Thanks, Kylie. Again, my name is Bernadette Lewis. I am the brand strategy manager over at Sophia Learning. We are an online learning platform that is learner driven on demand and offers 70 plus async courses that are designed to transfer to institutions for credit. Just really excited to be partnered with NACADA on Global Advising Week. We really adore our advisors that we work with over at Sophia, and just thank you guys for all you do to help support student success and keep learning moving forward.
Thank you very much. I'm going to now turn it over to Emily and the Advisor Training and Development Advising community as they will be facilitating today's event.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. This is a much larger, I'll be perfectly honest, this is a much larger crowd than we expected, so please bear with us as we pivot a little bit in our format. But my name is Emily Ford. I'm the Director of Coordinated Advising at Lehigh University, and I will allow my other colleagues here to introduce themselves.
Sure. Good afternoon or good morning. My name is Temple Carter. I am the Director of Academic Advising Strategy and Talent Development at the Texas A&M University System.
I can go next. I'm Will Smith. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Advising at the College of Arts and Sciences at Indiana University.
And hi, everybody. My name is Corey Moan. I'm an academic advisor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, specifically in the College of Arts and Sciences.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a panel today, a lot of discussion we had planned for today, talk a little bit about different perspectives on effective new advisor training. So we are going to begin our conversation with a brief overview of adult learning theory. And then we're going to turn it over to two different perspectives on onboarding from different number of years in the field and in advising. So I'll let them talk about that in just a moment. And then the third part of this is our plan is to have you share your insights and best practices so that we can all learn from each other. So just to kind of get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Temple, talk about adult learning theory.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. I'm very excited, everyone, because I got a new laptop recently, and so now I can open like 3 or 4 applications at the same time. So I'm very excited about that. Okay, just to make sure, is it showing?
Yes.
It's showing in the chat. That's what it says.
Okay, so it's sharing the PowerPoint in the chat. Okay, so in the chat, if you can for me, I want you to think back to when you were a new academic advisor. And I want you to answer this question. What helped you learn the most? Or what do you wish what had been different about the experience, what you learned? So take a moment, and if you could put that in the chat, please.
This is great. I think it's going too fast to read all of these once.
I'm gonna have to actually exit so I can see some of them. Okay, see? So, so learning from other advisors, having access to colleagues. Oh, these are wonderful. Please feel free to use an emoji or anything next to the ones that you're like, yes. Ooh, reverse shadowing. That's a great one. What I wish I had, but different. Having a manual. I learned the most by just jumping in, going with the flow. Love this. Case studies and practice. Well, these are some good ideas, y'all. Thank you for sharing them.
Yeah.
Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Even as we go through the session today, please keep these going. Access to information, made a binder for yourself. Policies, awesome. Okay. Okay, just to make sure the slide deck came back up because I'm on the laptop.
Yep, you're good.
Perfect, thank you. So just learning a little bit, a lot of the things that you said are hitting on what we're talking about today, which is the adult learning theory, also known as andragogy, which is different from what we're often used to hearing, which is pedagogy with working with, students or children. So everyone that is in your onboarding are going to be adults. And so there's 6 principles that Malcolm Knowles came up with about how to work with adult learners. So a lot of the things that you mentioned in here, you will probably be surprised if you're not familiar with this theory that you learned about already, that you're already doing. So the point of us letting you know this theory is just so you can be intentional about your design when you're doing onboarding to remember who your audience is. So really quick, has anyone is familiar with the adult learning theory? And somebody may have to help me out because I can't see the chat or hands.
You're getting some thumbs up.
Good,
Some
awesome.
folks. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, those that are familiar with it, please feel free to throw stuff in the chat as we go through it. But as we go through all of the 6 principles, what I want you to ask yourself, if you train or help with onboarding or any type of professional development with academic advising, think to yourself, how have I used this? Because you may be doing it and don't even realize it. And then also think about, if I'm not using it, how can I incorporate this for a more rich experience for the audience? Okay, you ready for number 1? The first one, need to know. So adults learn best when they understand why it's relevant to their goals and to their challenges. So instead of just giving policies and procedures or saying, here's the degree audit, give the why behind it. So if we said, okay, we're going to teach you the degree audit, what's the why behind that? So knowing what the why is, the need to know. So even starting off your trainings with, this is why we are telling you this, is best for adult learning. And if we're looking at this, how have y'all used that in your onboarding? Or how do you plan to use it? Please put it in the chat. The whole thing about this session is for us to learn from each other. So for the first principles, for the need to know, putting that why behind it, how have you incorporated, or if that's giving you an idea, how would you plan to incorporate it into some of your session? Drop them in the chat. So the second one is self-concept. So adults prefer self-directed learning, taking control of the what, how, and when they learn. So how could you incorporate that into your onboarding experience and professional development? So instead of being very stagnant and staccato with everything, how can you give some time for them to be self-directed learners as well with the onboarding? And just like with the first one, please drop your ideas in the chat for that one as well too. And if y'all see any good ones, please feel free, fellow facilitators, to come off mute and let me know. Unfortunately, I can't see the chat. with this specific view. But if you see any good ideas or recommendations or questions, hey, come off mute and let us know.
So Maggie, I was just looking at what Maggie had written, that I realized each faculty member is coming from a different background with advising. I started with a what is advising and what does good advising look like before beginning the training. So yes, kudos to you for that. I thought that was a great way to start. And sharing big picture goals, giving options of topics to study first. I think that's another. And then someone else had said that sometimes training is a just-in-time piece. So if someone starts in the summer, we aren't going to show everything, and I completely agree with that. Yeah, I think the just-in-time approach definitely works well.
Nice. These are great. So let's see number 3, experience. This is a big one right here. The experience. A lot of people bring their past experiences to academic advising. So making connections with what learners already know, because they come with and someone told me this earlier, so I'm going to use it again, a backpack worth of knowledge. So even if they don't have a formal background in academic advising, or sometimes even specifically just in higher ed, they still come with a wealth of knowledge and experience. So how can you tap into that? So then that way they can help with their learning as well too. How can you embed that into the onboarding so that way they are taking some of their past experiences and their life knowledge and bringing it into the work that they're doing, instead of just telling them this is how it is and this is what you need to learn. So once again, how have you put that into your onboarding or training experiences or experienced it yourself? Drop it in the chat. Like I said, this is a great way for us to learn from each other.
See, one person, Mary, had mentioned a choose for self-concept, to choose like a choose your own journey section in their first year advisor training, where they can complete 3 additional professional development opportunities. I think that's a great way to approach this. Just trying to read through these real quick here.
And then I'll put number 4. The 4th one is readiness. Adults engage when learning solves real life problems they are currently facing. And with academic advising or a lot of areas in higher education, there's lots of examples to use. So giving them case studies, giving them ways to practice that, to where it's real life scenarios that they go through. So someone even mentioned, I think, the reverse shadowing or just shadowing in your onboarding experience. That is a way for new advisors to engage and to see about solving those real life problems firsthand. So once again, feel free to throw those in the chat and we'll go through the last 2 and then we'll kind of pick some more out of the chat to kind of highlight. So the 5th one, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Someone had asked if we could get a copy. I'm just going to ask maybe Kylie if we'll be able to get a copy of the suggestions that are all listed in the chat. I think a lot of people have had some helpful resources, so hopefully we can get a copy of the chat conversation. We can compile that.
Yes, I can send that to you all.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the 5th one is orientation. So adults focus on practical problem solving learning rather than theory. So the one thing about this, I always tell people, it's not that we're saying not to teach theory or approaches or anything like that. What it's saying is that adults usually want to go to the practical, task-oriented, problem-solving learning, rather than just focus on the theory. So how could you put those problem-solving things or ways for the adults to figure out the specific problems into your onboarding experience? And then 6, the last one, the last principle is motivation. So adults are internally motivated, driven. They want that growth, that mastery. It fuels adult learning more so than external awards. I mean, I can have all the fidget toys and stickers in the world, but that internal motivation, it has to come from the individual. So even with that, there's ways to build that into your onboarding program. And if you've done that, what are some ways that you've done that so individuals can have that internal motivation, that internal drive? during the training process. So if you wanted to take a screenshot of this, feel free. And what I'm going to do is take the slides down just for us to have a quick conversation before we turn it over to Will and Corey. But these are the 6 principles. And if you're not familiar with it, it is great to get more information on. There's a lot of information out there on them. But even just kind of picking 1 or 2 to start with, don't feel like you have to do all 6, can definitely help your onboarding program. And the great thing about the conversation to come is just to hear the experience from a trainer, an advisor trainer, and then also someone that's been a trainee as well. So, any questions or thoughts about the adult learning theory? These are some great. I'm just now being able to see the chat, y'all. But these are some wonderful, wonderful things that y'all are putting in here. Sharing history of a process. Yes, don't just say this is the process. What is the history behind it and the why? 30-minute pre-training check-in. These are wonderful. Self-concept as their questions arise. I'm going to say keep them coming, but I want to turn it over to Corey and Will, who's going to tell you more about their experiences.
Right, so we thought we would have give you some examples of two different perspectives here. I guess Will, do you want to, or whichever one of you wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first. I
Okay,
have a couple of slides myself, though they're unfortunately not nearly as polished as Temple's, but they will make do. Do you see my slides?
yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll move it into presenter view. And so I'm in a rather large advising unit. We have about 55 advisors and we have about a 7-person leadership team. So one of the things that I thought might be useful is like us to think about today, and this includes everybody, everyone here, is like, how does the scale of your unit or the setting you're doing affect what actually good advising training looks like? Because I think setting and context matters and what is going to be more or less helpful and effective. So thinking with mine, some of the things when I was hired into when I moved into my current role, I was tasked with sort of re-envisioning our new advisor training program, and some of the principles I took to it was things like I was thinking our initial period, our first 3 or 4 weeks or so, is for initial training is only for foundations. I don't know about all your contacts. The amount of stuff our advisors have to know to varying degrees across so many different areas of the university is so extensive. There's no way they can internalize it in a meaningful way in such a short period of time. So I didn't even try. I saw no point. So some of my core goals were that I just wanted them to be able to be able to do the job functionally, because I figured if they have enough knowledge as a kind of out schematic, like sort of, I tell them, I use the metaphor of like a house. Like when you see a house being built and you just have the frame up and you don't have doors or walls or anything like that, I tell them that's what we're doing. And then over time, you're going to fill it all in over that first year. And you're going to end up, by the end of the first year, you're going to have your curtains and all the nice things. And one, because it's in my thinking is they're gonna learn more and more deeply if they have something to start with that they start filling in and build on as they get through nuanced questions, right? They're gonna talk to colleagues, they're gonna make connections across different areas. And I start having them do some of that in our initial training, but I know I can only accomplish so much. So I'm trying to, if anything, I'm trying to give them more framework of how to think through things and starting a few key pointers so that they can build on. And because the whole thing is like Temple said about using their motivation and their past experiences, I think of their initial training as an additional period of that past experience, right? So if you take just a little, if you can give them a core solid foundation to build off they're going to make advances and they're going to do it rapidly, in my experience. So those were some of the principles I used. And then one of the things that I did was I was thinking it's really important. The older model in my unit had been set them up for the like first 2, 3 weeks and then just let them do what everyone else does for ongoing professional development. And I didn't like that approach. I wanted some thick support across the first year. So yes, you want them to be learning on their own, but you also want to have scaffolding across that first year to help them at key moments and about key things to make sure they achieve certain things. So in my unit, we have a more specialized model where we have assigned majors and departments. And so I wanted to think, how do I make sure they're doing that contextual work well first? So one of the things I started a year ago was doing curricular deep dives with established advisors. So all of our advisors are in clusters with other advisors. And so this sort of honors the mastery that established advisors have, right? Because they know good things about specific curricula with majors, minors, and certificates, how specific departments and programs work. So help the new advisors get to that area level of mastery quickly by sharing with what the established advisors already know. I'm one person. I can't know everything about 80 different units. It's just not possible. So leverage the expertise you have in different parts of your unit is what I was thinking. And then, as many people in the chat in response to Temple's good prompting said, shadow, shadow, shadow is a great way. Watch and learn, right? And so, in their second week on the job, I have them start shadowing, and then they do some more into the third week normally. And I try to give them a range of people so that they have different models of what may be effective modes of communication and how to explain things, thinking about what works for the new advisor themselves. Because one of the things I like to talk about is, we don't all have the same personality. We don't have all the same communication styles. So try to figure out what you can take from people to make your own. And then, and somebody else put this in the chat earlier, is the power of reverse shadowing. And this is, somebody put it in the chat too, just-in-time pedagogy, right? You want to think about, when possible, getting the connection when it's live and fresh and help establish good practices. So I then start having them shift from shadowing to reverse shadowing. They're oftentimes feeling not quite ready. And I think that's okay. I actually think starting before you're fully comfortable is not a bad practice, especially if you have some support there. So you can be like, so that there's an established advisor. So it's low pressure. You don't feel like you're being judged by your direct supervisor, by me, whatever, right? It's a friend, it's a new colleague, right? And so that they can start learning good practices relationally, informationally, conceptually, right from the get-go in a supportive environment. Then I encourage the other supervisors in my unit to do it. I do this is, after a few weeks they've been on the job, then do some direct supervisor sort of informal observations for additional support and feedback with no feeling there's nothing resting on it. Like it's not a part of an evaluation. There's no write up or something. And then we have a formal observation during the new advisor's first full fall or spring, where the direct supervisor and another leadership team member will do 2 rounds of formal observations, all with the purpose of just helping them be set up for success in the long run. But there's also, I have a very layered, very complicated ongoing new training program that I'm going to spare you the various wheels of for art because we don't have time. But there's some things that I do that have, like, every month we have certain trainings that just happen because they don't have to happen at a particular time in the new advisor's first year, but it's core information that's good. They get some time then. So like January, February, and March for my unit is foreign languages, math, and chemistry deep dives because they're not specific to a degree. Sorry, I totally jumped my order and my slide. I apologize, but I'm going to run with it. And so we get advisors and leaders together to meet with the new advisors and say, this is going to affect all your degrees at some point, even if you're working with student during new student orientation. They want to be pre-med. You need to know our crazy chemistry curriculum because we have a very non-standard chemistry curriculum here at IU Bloomington. And so that they get that kind of advanced knowledge at some point. I always work with them on things like learning how to do philosophy statements, advisor theory and approach foundations, because one of my goals for them is to set them up to be able to be engaged in a larger profession. I don't want them to simply be able to advise on a degree. I want them to think about themselves as being in an active profession. And so we make sure they have the structured support to think about the bigger picture. Uh, And then we have ones during either their first fall or spring, whatever the full term is after their initial training. This one is again a different version of that just-in-time sort of pedagogy. It's trying to time these very detailed, very nuts and bolts oriented, so motivation focused, right, and orientation from the andragogy, right, to like if you're going to be doing, stuff with students around withdrawals at a given point in the semester, time the training to land around that point at the time in the calendar, right? Trying to align the right content with when they're actually going to be using it. And those have gone off over very well with the new advisors. And I think that's it. So that is my very quick spiel about some things I have thought about and brought to our revised and enhanced new advisor program at IU Bloomington. So.
Thank you, Will. So that was from a trainer of in a large advising unit, that perspective. So I'll let Corey introduce himself and
I have a quick question
yeah,
to go off of Will's part.
sure.
The reverse shadowing pieces, is that only leadership team or only a few people do the reverse shadowing, or do any peer advisors reverse shadow?
I love that question. Occasionally it's leadership team, but I actually normally have the established advisors do it. And it serves, I think, a couple goals. One is oftentimes, if possible, I have it with people in the same cluster as they start building those relationships, working relationships with each other, right?
Yep.
Two, I prefer it not being the direct supervisor or other leadership initially because I want the pressure to be low so they're not worried about making mistakes. So if they do stumble, if they do stall, it feels safer to do that in that space. And because I really want them to focus on growing as a new advisor, I don't want them to feel judged.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. We do peer reverse shadowing in our training. And so I just wanted some clarity on whether you did that as well. But I understand the commitment to the clusters as well. So I appreciate that clarity.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Corey. As I said earlier, I'm at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I'm going to give the kind of the perspective, I guess, of someone who's more recently been through training. And I was very blessed, I would say, to have gone through the training that I did. My supervisor, when I started, had a very thorough training, and there was a few things that really stood out to me as when I was being trained. And those are some of the things that I just wanted to share. I don't really have any slides or anything like that, but I was just going to kind of highlight a few things. One thing that I really appreciated and I think was good for the people that are in charge of training is to keep in mind that other people on campus or in your unit have areas of expertise that they're able and hopefully willing to share. So I think the first thing just being like have other advisors or other departments help where applicable, I guess, is kind of the simple way of saying it. Remember that you probably have other aspects of your job to do, especially those of you who maybe don't have a training as your sole focus, but you might have, a caseload of your own or people to supervise or various things like that. So using other people in their areas of expertise can be really, really good. And kind of along with that is, and I think it was mentioned in the chat quite a bit, is the ability to be mentored by a seasoned advisor, I think is super, super helpful. And it can be someone who maybe doesn't have that, supervisory role over the person being trained solely because, it can be a little bit intimidating, when you're stepping in, new supervisor, still getting the lay of the land. So having somebody that you can kind of go to just with those, you know, things that you might think are silly questions, and, feel like you won't be judged. And I saw in the chat as well, people talking about a training checklist. That's something that I think was really, really helpful for me and others that I've talked to about being trained is that it's like, here's all the things you're going to get trained on, and here's a schedule ahead of time of when you're going to get trained on it. So I think that's something that I think was really helpful. So then it was like, okay, I don't need to know everything by the end of week one. I just need to know these things today, and I can focus on tomorrow. So those are some things that kind of stood out there. I think another thing that's really important is knowing the person's strengths in their background. So myself, I worked in housing for almost a decade. So I remember my supervisor telling me, hey, the relational side of stuff, you've done that for years. You know how to connect with a student. Let's focus on some of the other things that you don't know, or that maybe you're not quite as like confident in. So I really appreciated that, it was kind of tailored a little bit to what was I already good at and what was I like, I'm really not sure what to do. And then along with that, really early on, building or starting to discuss a professional development plan beyond the training, I think is really good. And again, tailoring it to the person. Some people really enjoy conference attendance and that's how they learn. Other people are like, I don't like that. It's too big of a setting. I would much rather do something else. So kind of just making sure to tailor it to that person. And then obviously continuing to revisit that in one-on-one meetings with that supervisor, the supervisor and supervisee after the training has concluded as well. Another thing that I think is really, really important, not only for the the person training, but the person being trained, is the regular check-ins that you can do, and you can kind of determine how often that needs to be done. I think something for me that was really helpful was just at the end of each week, my supervisor sat down and said, "Okay, everything that you learned this week." What do you still have questions about, or what are you something you want to revisit? There were some things that I was like, nope, I feel great about that. Training on that was awesome. And then there were other things that, of course, you're going to look at and go, I know we talked about that, but it still doesn't make sense. So then we were able to kind of have that discussion and kind of circle back to that, you know, re- you know, as needed. I think another thing, really basic, but remember that there is a person on the other end of that training. It's so easy to just be like, this is the process, this is when we need to do it, and also just kind of remember what it was like to be trained. I think it's so important to just have the people side of things. I saw somebody in the chat mention how is self-care incorporated into training. I think that's really important to talk about and discuss, especially early on. And then another thing that I really, really appreciated, and I'm still learning, being new to advising, is retraining on things when they are relevant. So, for example, I was hired in November. My supervisor briefly touched on this is kind of how we do new student enrollment. But then when new student enrollment came around for summer, we had a much more in-depth discussion about it because it was around the corner. So I think that was something that was really helpful because if I would have not had that, it, it would have been like I would have been doing the new student enrollment and been absolutely lost because I would have been like, this is different than the advising meetings I've been doing for the last semester. So something to kind of keep in mind there. And then again, I think the last thing I have is, and it seems very simple, but encouraging them to ask questions. And no question is a silly question. And another couple things that we did that I think was really helpful is we did create some Canvas trainings that some folks on campus here at UNL have created that were really helpful that we can kind of refer back to whenever. And then also we have a couple of we call them advising notebooks in OneNote that are really, really helpful, that are basically any question you could ever think of when it comes to advising can be found in those notebooks. And we have one specifically for the College of Arts and Sciences, but then we also have a more campus-wide one, and then another one that's specifically geared towards new student enrollment and some of those, more intricate questions of like, where do they start in math? How does that work? How does math placement work? Various things like that. And I would guess it took a ton of time to build all of that stuff, but now that it's there, it's awesome and just kind of needs to be tweaked and, whatnot. So that's kind of everything I had for, um, from my perspective. So yeah, we can kind of jump to the next thing then.
Thank you. So there's been some good conversations in the chat, which I would love to kind of bring to the larger group if that's all right. And specifically, I'm looking a couple things. Edna, Renee, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot, but you had some great ideas, and I figured you'd be happy to chime in. If you don't mind talking a little bit about the advisor buddies, and then I love your question about advisor well-being and that piece. So maybe we can start with that discussion.
Okay. So, I can touch a little bit on the advisor well-being thing first. I think sometimes those of us who have been advising for a while forget what it's like to be new and feeling like you have to do all the things all at once. So sometimes it's having conversation with our new advisors. You don't need to be doing this till 7. Go home. You don't need to take your laptop with you over the weekend. So sometimes, having some of those conversations and trying to help them set boundaries because they're new, they're excited, they think they have to know all the things all at once. So trying to kind of set the guideline so that they still take care of their humanness and know that we don't expect them to kind of move mountains immediately. Um, the advisor buddies is actually an idea of my supervisor of, occasionally people want people to check in with them and have questions, but they don't want necessarily to ask their supervisor because sometimes they're like, what does this look like? I'm a bad new hire because I don't know the thing, or I'm not quite sure why we do the thing. And so sometimes they're just more comfortable with asking a colleague. So some of the more senior people on our team, in terms of how long they've been here, would be assigned to one of the new advisors, and they would, check in with them, occasionally take them to coffee. But that could be another touch point. So this person, okay, I have a question, and I don't necessarily want to ask my AD or Edna Renee as a lead advisor for the team, but I have this connection of someone I can't ask. There have been a few times we couldn't do it because like four of the advisors were like new, and then it was like me and my supervisor, and I'm like, well, we can't really have buddies this time around. But when we have enough seasoned people around, we do try to do that.
That's great. Thank you. And then I see Courtney, if you don't mind telling us, there's a lot of interest in your compassion fatigue training. If you don't mind telling us a little bit more about that.
Sure. My coworker Janelle actually led that presentation, so I'll let her give a little information on it.
Yes, I'm so happy y'all are excited about that. I'm glad Courtney brought that to the forefront. So we have a series. We're an advising training office at Texas Tech University, and we actually host events once a month called Tech Talks, and they're essentially programming made that are kind of outside the box, right? We've done a Gen Z one. I did the compassion fatigue one. And what we did is that we put together this presentation. I focused on, I think we gave it right before registration. Is that right, Courtney? I think it was right before registration. And it was about,
Yes.
where we were at in that time. And so I focused on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I tailored the needs to academic advisors, like what each need needs for this person to be successful, as well as I had input. I did a Mentimeter to see where they were all at. And what was funny is that most of them were all in the same place of I'm feeling stressed, I don't feel supported. And so to see those other people feeling the exact same way brought them together. We also talked about email. I think it was email fatigue or screen fatigue. And that was something that they had never really experienced or really put a name to it. And so it was a really good conversation for about 40 minutes. And then we gave different, like we have a employee counseling center here. I gave resources for that, as well as tips on setting up your office, because yes, we are here 8 hours a day, but if you're not set up correctly, it's going to be miserable. And so we just gave tips as well as what it looks like when you start reaching compassion fatigue versus burnout. And I think that was really eye-opening for a lot of them to realize that I'm not burned out. I just maybe need to rethink how I'm coming into work and how is that impacting academic or impacting students. It was well received. I think we had over 40 academic advisors attended online.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing.
It's great.
All right. Are there just kind of keeping an eye on the clock? We figure we'd use this last bit to share, just kind of discuss best practices, just like Janelle just did, or any of you that you want to highlight any particular programs that you have in place, maybe something that was mentioned in the chat that got a lot of traction. We'd love to hear more about it, so feel free to unmute yourself. Or any questions that folks have, feel free to ask. We can definitely open this up for discussion.
I will say, whoever mentioned the syllabus for training, I would love to hear more about that and like steal 100 copies of that for us. But I just had never thought about doing a syllabus for training, so I just thought that was amazing.
Oh, that was me. My supervisor created that. I did reach out to her to ask if it would be okay to share it. So I don't know if I'll hear from her before the workshop is over. And if so, I can always send it to Kylie to share it. But what she did was she created a syllabus, and each week, just like if you were in a class, you knew exactly what you were doing each week. And it had like your objective for the syllabus, all of that. It's pretty cool. And like links to different resources. So I didn't have to go out and look for them. So it was digital, but you could also print it out. But it was really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully we can get a copy and share that with the 100 some people on this call.
Like the syllabus here at Texas Tech as well. We send one out every semester, just like a student would get an intro to the course. And so I'm happy to share our syllabus.
Thank you.
Thing that we do at UNL that I think is really, really neat is we have a training and professional development specialist, so the person that oversees some of the trainings and whatnot. And she actually has a monthly it's geared toward first year advisors, but anyone can attend. And what it is the first 12-month training. So it's like, what's something that's relevant to this time of the year? And it meets once a week, once a month. And it's really neat just because then, you talk about things that are relevant to that time of the year. So that's something that I really appreciate, especially within my first couple of years is, hey, you know what? I haven't done that in a year. Let me go back and get trained on this, even though I know someone trained me on it previously. So that's something that's really neat.
So in the chat, someone asked about any tips. This is a good question. Any tips for engagement when institutional change fatigue has morale and energy down? It's a big question. That's a great question.
Emily, I can share a little bit of what
Sure.
we've done in my unit. Like a lot of institutions, IU and IU Bloomington have various levels of changes happening, sometimes more coordinated than others. So a lot of it we just can't control, right? We respond, we do what we have to do. But thinking about what we can do, so one of the things I've taken point on and I've worked with folks do is we do 3 times a year new advisor welcome breakfast, so that we then have and then we have general advisor celebration lunches. So we have an award every year, and when the students submit to start that award process, I share the students let me, I share the nominations with the advisors so that they hear positive things from students about their work, and trying to keep it back to like, we don't control everything, but we can be good to each other and you can hear the positive impact you're making. And so does that do make up for everything? No. The leadership team also tries very hard to be in my unit to listen attentively to what the advisors are saying and are concerned about, and invite that feedback and try to advocate as best we can on their behalf. And I think that helps to an extent. And then I know if she's willing to share, I know one of our advisors is here today, so maybe she would have some sense of what we've been doing that works and doesn't work too. So
Oh, that might be me. Um, in terms of working alongside Will, I really enjoy having the opportunity to kind of meet other people in different areas because we're so like concentrated in specific spaces. So when it comes to, like myself, I do more of a STEM background. For others, they're more in like languages, and I'm just not as familiar. And last semester, for example, I was paired with an advisor who's more in the international studies languages space. So just kind of seeing other things happen and how they kind of approach problems is super helpful because we kind of get a little tunnel visioned, in my opinion, with how we think through issues and problems. But I appreciate the ability to kind of poke other people, and having a direct lead is super helpful because we're such a big team at this point. Everybody has expanded quite a bit. So it does feel hard sometimes to stay on top of material when things are changing so quickly. So it has been a lot of asking my lead for things, and then my lead will poke another lead. And then now all of a sudden it's on a website, and we're able to kind of like see what other people have put together. Sometimes it's slow because, again, the changes happen so quickly. It's really hard to kind of figure out what we're doing if we're not sure what the complete change is. But it has been, I think, a challenge to understand what we don't know until it happens. That is maybe the one thing that relying on other peers has really informed me, because I get stuck in a rut with how we think through problems in like neuroscience and psychology versus how like biology would kind of approach their like weirdness or new things that are happening. Because like another thing that we're doing is we do ask questions from the department quite a bit, and then we pass that along also to advising. And it just makes it's like another layer of, I think, complexity over time that is really hard to learn as a brand new professional. And again, we're doing these deep dives. I think the deep dives are really interesting, and I like to see the other ones as well, because I just wouldn't have known how that specific space works, especially when it's like a departmental thing or a thing that they have preferences over. So I think it's really cool to have a lot of the integration and then a lot of the additional support that we didn't have like 3 or 4 years ago.
Thank you.
I think also to add on to that question, is thinking about your team and places where there are actually big enough groups. It would be worth it to think of team members who've been around and have for other ways a good attitude, that could be the people who sit down and talks like, yes, this is a lot of change, this is how we've gone through change before in this unit. So kind of in some ways normalizing some of the change and normalizing that, yeah, this is a bit of a rough spot, but we've got each other's back. So that might be a place where the advisor buddy system or something comes into place, that you've got people who kind of give the context and say we're going to be okay. um, the other thing that my unit actually got permission to do, which I think has helped us out a lot, is we have an advisor wellness week. So we have a whole week with no student appointments that we're actually focusing on wellness. Our team retreat is our unit retreats in there as well. But that's a whole week where we teach in the fall. So it's also planning for teaching in the fall, but also doing the wellness thing. So we go into summer, which is our busiest time, in a well space so we can actually be there to help our students. So we're not coming into summer tired from the spring. So we have a variety of options that people can do. So we have events that people can opt to go to, or people could just opt to take the week off or opt to, do whatever else they need to do to recenter themselves. And that's kind of really helped with every summer's been different. Every summer's been different. But the Wellness Week has kind of helped me get ready for, well, what's the different thing this summer, and to have energy to go into that.
If I could chime in here, something that we learned last year at the NACADA conference is really having an understanding of your why. When there's constant change, we need to have something that we can go back to ground us. And so people come to the advising space with different whys, but when we can really tap into that and remember things are changing around us, some people that were buddies may have left the group and are no longer with us, but why are we here in the first place? And if we could just, remind ourselves in those times when there's so much change in so little time, it's really helpful to keep the morale and the energy of the team up.
Thank you. All right. I'm just any last thoughts, suggestions, ideas, and we're gonna figure out the best way to get information to you all. I guess Kylie or Amber, is it all right? What would be the best email address to send any kind of documents to that people are sharing and willing to share, fortunately?
I can put it in the chat because the new advisor subcommittee is actually has a Google Drive they've set up. And so I'll place that in the chat and anyone can share directly with that. And then I believe they're going to link a link to that also to on our forum.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Any last questions or comments before we close today? Well, thank you all so much. I'm excited. This was a great conversation. I will say, as I said at the beginning, we thought there were going to be just a small handful, especially at this point in the semester. So we were pleasantly surprised to see so many. We weren't sure exactly if it was going to be how we were going to gauge y'all, but you stepped up. So thank you for making this such a wonderful session. And we will follow up with the chat transcript and any materials and things like that. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your days and happy Global Advising Week.